August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. The city of Hiroshima awakens to what seems like an ordinary wartime morning. Air raid sirens had sounded earlier, but the all-clear has been given. Children head to school. Workers report to factories. Nearly 350,000 people go about their lives, unaware that in mere moments the world will change forever. At that precise moment, 31,000 feet above the city, a single American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay releases its payload. What happens next takes just 43 seconds. 43 seconds for humanity to cross a threshold from which there would be no return. To understand the magnitude of what occurred, we must first step back to the summer of 1945. The war in the Pacific has raged for nearly 4 years. Island by island, the United States and its allies have pushed Japanese forces back toward the home islands. The cost has been staggering. At Iwo Jima alone, nearly 7,000 American servicemen died. At Okinawa, the number exceeded 12,000. But Japan refuses to surrender. The military leadership, steeped in the code of Bushido, considers surrender to be the ultimate disgrace. They prepare for what they call Ketsugo, the decisive battle for the homeland. Every man, woman, and child is being trained to fight. The Japanese High Command estimates they can inflict 2 million Allied casualties in an invasion. American intelligence knows this. President Harry Truman, thrust into office just months earlier after Roosevelt's death, faces an impossible decision. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, is scheduled for November 1945. Military planners predict it could last into 1946, possibly longer. The human cost would be unimaginable. But America has a secret. A weapon so devastating, so unprecedented, that even its creators question whether humanity should possess such power. For 3 years, in absolute secrecy, America has been developing the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project has cost nearly $2 billion, equivalent to over $30 billion today. The brightest minds in physics have gathered in Los Alamos, New Mexico, under the direction of J. Robert Oppenheimer. On July 16, 1945, in the desert of New Mexico, they conduct the Trinity test, the first atomic bomb ever detonated. The blast creates a flash of light visible for 200 miles. A mushroom cloud rises 40,000 feet into the air. The heat is so intense it turns sand into glass. Oppenheimer, witnessing what they've created, recalls a line from Hindu scripture. "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." The weapon works. And now the question becomes, will it be used? The Potsdam Declaration is issued on July 26th, demanding Japan's unconditional surrender and warning of prompt and utter destruction if they refuse. The declaration is deliberately vague about what this destruction might entail. Japan's response comes on July 28th. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki uses the word mokusatsu, to ignore with silent contempt. Whether this was intended as outright rejection or simply a statement that Japan was still considering its options remains debated to this day. But for American leadership, the message is clear. Japan will not surrender. August 5, 1945. On Tinian Island in the Mariana Chain, the crew of the Enola Gay receives their final briefing. They've been training for months, flying practice missions, preparing for something they're told is of utmost importance. But until this moment, most don't know exactly what they'll be carrying. Colonel Paul Tibbets, the pilot, reveals the truth. The bomb they'll drop codenamed Little Boy, has the explosive power of 15,000 tons of TNT. It weighs nearly 10,000 pounds and is 10 feet long. A single bomb with more destructive capability than all the bombs they've dropped in previous missions combined. At 2:45 a.m. on August 6th, the Enola Gay takes off. The weather is clear. The flight takes 6 hours. 2 observation planes accompany them to document the results. At 8:09 a.m., they begin their final approach to Hiroshima. Why Hiroshima? The target list has been carefully selected. The cities must be large enough to demonstrate the bomb's full power. They must have military significance. And crucially, they must be relatively untouched by conventional bombing. Otherwise, how would anyone know what the atomic bomb alone could do? Hiroshima is home to the Second Army headquarters. It's a major military supply depot, and it's been largely spared from the firebombing campaigns that have devastated other Japanese cities. In a cruel twist of fate, this preservation has sealed its doom. At 8:15 and 17 seconds, the bomb bay doors open. Little Boy falls for 43 seconds before reaching its detonation altitude of 1,900 feet above the city. The Enola Gay executes a sharp diving turn to escape the blast radius. What happens next defies human comprehension. The bomb's uranium core achieves critical mass. In 1/1,000,000th of a second, a nuclear chain reaction releases energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The temperature at the hypocenter reaches several million degrees Celsius, hotter than the surface of the sun. People within half a mile of ground zero are vaporized instantly. Literally vaporized. Some leave only shadows burned into concrete walls, the only evidence they ever existed. Those farther away are burned by thermal radiation so intense it melts metal and glass. The flash of light is so bright it can be seen for hundreds of miles. 1 second after detonation, a pressure wave expands outward at 7,200 miles per hour. Buildings disintegrate. Reinforced concrete structures crumble like sandcastles. The blast wave bounces off the ground and creates a second shock wave that flattens anything still standing. Then comes the wind. Hurricane-force winds that scatter debris for miles. The mushroom cloud rises, first red and orange from the heat, then dirty brown and gray from the thousands of tons of debris being sucked upward. It climbs to 40,000 feet, visible from over 200 miles away. And then comes the fire. Thousands of individual fires ignited by the thermal pulse merge into a firestorm. The intense heat creates its own weather system, generating winds that feed the flames. The fire burns for hours, consuming everything in an area of roughly 4.4 square miles. And now we come to the central question. What did Japanese High Command say when they learned of this weapon? In Tokyo, 500 miles away, the initial reports are confused and fragmentary. The first word reaches the Imperial Japanese Army General Staff around 11 a.m. Communications with Hiroshima have been cut off. Reconnaissance planes report that the city has been destroyed by a single bomb, but this seems impossible. The man who would provide the most significant first-hand account is Lieutenant General Torashiro Kawabe, Deputy Chief of the Imperial Japanese Army General Staff. On August 8th, 2 days after Hiroshima and 1 day before Nagasaki, he writes in his diary, documenting the High Command's reaction to reports of the new weapon. Kawabe writes, "We have heard that the atomic bomb is being used. This is unbelievable. But if it is true, we cannot continue the war." Let that sink in. Here is a senior military commander, part of a leadership that has been willing to sacrifice millions of lives to avoid surrender, admitting that this weapon changes everything. But not all of the military command shares this view. War Minister General Korochika Anami remains defiant. Even after the Nagasaki bombing on August 9th, he argues for continuing the fight. He claims the Americans could not have many more such bombs. He insists that Japan's spirit can overcome even this weapon. He proposes one final, decisive battle that will break American will. Field Marshal Shunroku Hata, commander of the 2nd General Army headquartered in Hiroshima, survives the blast because he is in a bunker outside the main destruction zone. When he emerges and surveys the devastation, he sends a report to Tokyo that captures the surreal horror in military language. The whole city of Hiroshima was destroyed instantly by a single bomb. What follows is one of the most dramatic moments in military history. On the night of August 9th, with 2 cities destroyed and the Soviet Union having just declared war on Japan hours earlier, Emperor Hirohito convenes the Supreme War Council. The meeting takes place in an underground air raid shelter. Present are the 6 members of the council: Prime Minister Suzuki, Foreign Minister Togo, War Minister Anami, Navy Minister Yonai, Army Chief of Staff Umezu, and Navy Chief of Staff Toyota. The council is deadlocked, 3 votes for surrender, 3 against. The military hardliners cannot accept unconditional surrender. They propose 4 conditions. Japan must be allowed to conduct its own war crimes trials. Disarmament must be conducted by Japanese forces. No occupation of the Japanese homeland. And most crucially, preservation of the imperial system, with the emperor retaining power. The debate rages for hours. Finally, Prime Minister Suzuki takes an unprecedented step. He asks the emperor himself to break the deadlock. This is called the sacred decision, the voice of the emperor himself determining Japan's fate. Emperor Hirohito speaks. His words are measured, formal, delivered in classical Japanese that most citizens will struggle to understand. But the message is clear. The enemy has begun to employ a new and most cruel bomb, the power of which to do damage is indeed incalculable, taking the toll of many innocent lives. Should we continue to fight, it would not only result in an ultimate collapse and obliteration of the Japanese nation, but also it would lead to the total extinction of human civilization. The extinction of human civilization. The Emperor of Japan, descendant of the Sun Goddess, is saying that this weapon threatens not just Japan, but all of humanity. On August 15, 1945, the Emperor's surrender announcement is broadcast to the Japanese people. Many hear the Emperor's voice for the first time. He had been a remote, almost mythical figure. Some military officers attempt a coup to prevent the surrender. They fail. War Minister Anami commits ritual suicide rather than live with the shame of surrender. Lieutenant General Kawabe, whose diary gave us that crucial insight into the military's thinking, survives the war. In later interviews, he elaborates on his initial reaction. He describes a sense of helplessness that no military commander ever wants to admit. All our tactical and strategic planning became meaningless, he says. How do you defend against a weapon that can destroy an entire city in an instant? We had been prepared to sacrifice millions in defense of the homeland. But against this weapon, there was no defense. No amount of courage or fighting spirit could prevail. But the real story isn't just what the military commanders said. It's what the survivors experienced and what the world inherited. Survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, known as hibakusha, carried physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. Many developed cancers years or decades later. Children born to survivors had higher rates of birth defects. The social stigma was severe. Hibakusha often couldn't find work or marriage partners because people feared radiation was contagious. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya, director of the Hiroshima Communications Hospital, kept a diary of his experiences. He writes of patients whose hair fell out in clumps, whose skin developed purple spots, who bled from their gums and noses. I realized, he writes, that we were dealing with something beyond any medical knowledge I possessed. This was a new kind of warfare, and we were utterly unprepared for it. Today, the hypercenter of the Hiroshima blast is marked by the atomic bomb dome, the skeletal remains of one of the few buildings to partially survive. It's been preserved exactly as it was found after the bombing, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a stark reminder of what happened here. But the legacy of August 6, 1945 extends far beyond Hiroshima. The atomic age had begun, and with it came the terrifying prospect of nuclear annihilation. Within years, the Soviet Union developed its own atomic bomb. Then, the hydrogen bomb, thousands of times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Japan. Britain, France, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea. The nuclear club expanded. At the height of the Cold War, there were enough nuclear weapons to destroy human civilization many times over. The doctrine of mutual assured destruction, MAD, kept the superpowers from direct conflict, but created a world living under the constant threat of nuclear war. Every crisis, the Berlin blockade, the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, confrontations over Taiwan, carried the risk of escalation to nuclear exchange. What would General Kawabe think if he could see the world that emerged from that moment in Hiroshima? His observation that we cannot continue the war in the face of nuclear weapons has become the foundation of modern deterrence theory. No nation can win a nuclear war. The only winning move, as the famous film quote goes, is not to play. 79 years later, the debate continues. Was dropping the atomic bomb justified? Those who defend the decision argue it saved lives. An invasion of Japan would have cost hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of Allied casualties, and even more Japanese deaths. The firebombing of Tokyo in March 1945 killed more people than the Hiroshima bomb, around 100,000, and the war continued. Conventional warfare was killing tens of thousands every month the war continued. From this perspective, the atomic bomb, horrible as it was, ended the war quickly and actually reduced total casualties. Critics argued that Japan was already defeated, that the Soviet entry into the war would have forced surrender anyway, that the bombs were dropped more to intimidate the Soviets than to defeat Japan. They point out that the targeting deliberately included civilians. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were cities full of non-combatants. They argue that demonstrating the bomb's power on an uninhabited area could have achieved the same result. The truth, as with most historical questions, is complex. The decision was made by people operating with incomplete information, under tremendous pressure, shaped by years of brutal warfare that had coarsened everyone's sense of acceptable violence. The firebombing of Japanese and German cities had already crossed moral lines. The atomic bomb was different in degree, but perhaps not in kind. What we can say with certainty is this: the development and use of nuclear weapons changed humanity forever. We created the means of our own extinction. And unlike other technologies, we can't uninvent it. The knowledge exists, the materials exist, the weapons exist. Every year on August 6th, a ceremony is held in Hiroshima. Thousands gather at the Peace Memorial Park. At 8:15 a.m., a bell rings. For 1 minute, silence. Then doves are released, symbols of peace, flying over a city that rose from ashes. The inscription on the memorial reads, "Rest in peace, for the error shall not be repeated." But whose error? The error of war? The error of nuclear weapons? The error of human violence itself? The hibakusha, now in their 80s and 90s, spend their remaining years speaking to anyone who will listen. Their message is simple. No one should ever experience what they experienced. Nuclear weapons must never be used again. Lieutenant General Kawabe's diary entry. We have heard that the atomic bomb is being used. This is unbelievable. But if it is true, we cannot continue the war. Captures a moment of recognition. Recognition that warfare had crossed a threshold, that a new chapter in human history had begun. That recognition should haunt us still. Because 79 years later, there are approximately 13,000 nuclear warheads in the world. Most are far more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we live in a world where the decisions to use them might have to be made in minutes, not days. The story of what happened when Japanese commanders witnessed America's secret weapon isn't just a story about World War II. It's a story about the moment humanity acquired the power to destroy itself. What we do with that knowledge, how we ensure that August 6th, 1945 was both the first and last use of nuclear weapons against human beings. That's the question that still confronts us. The shadow burned into stone at Hiroshima isn't just the shadow of a person vaporized by the bomb. It's the shadow of our own potential for destruction. A permanent reminder of what we're capable of when we combine human ingenuity with human violence. In his later years, J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, was asked if he had any regrets. He quoted another line from the Bhagavad Gita. In battle, in the forest, at the precipice in the mountains, on the dark great sea, in the midst of javelins and arrows, in sleep, in confusion, in the depths of shame. The good deeds a man has done before defend him. Whether the atomic bomb was a good deed or humanity's greatest sin, that's a question each generation must answer for itself.